back home to me, where rivers are running free, through valleys as far as the eye can see. I'll be waiting on you till you're in my arms, a place that you can call your home.
All right. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the 7th service of the Alayla Ministry, where our faith is rooted in God, our divine creator. I am minister, teacher, student, and servant Andrea Grace. So thank you for joining today. And today's service, we will be exploring the mysteries of the number 7 and how the number 7 is the journey to perfection. But let us first start with prayer that reminds us and brings that home. It's just a short one, but let's bring your two hands together. Take a nice centering breath. Divine Father, hear our prayer. Cleanse us from sin. Show us your glory. Reveal your love, and let your Spirit sanctify our hearts forevermore and increasingly make us perfect like yourself. Amen. And let's review our ministry's mission. Our mission is to provide a safe and supportive space for individuals seeking holistic healing and spiritual guidance, grounded in our faith in God. We believe that true healing comes from a connection to the divine and the recognition of the inherent divinity within each individual. We seek to honor the body, mind, and spirit connection through natural healing methods aligned with God's design for the human body. We strive to empower individuals to take an active role in their own healing process by providing guidance and support that's rooted in spiritual principles. And we aim to create an environment that fosters compassion, connection, and growth. Through our work, we hope to inspire others to deepen their faith in God and to discover the transformative power of spiritual healing. And so I just wanted to pick up where we left off from the last service and share a little bit more about my story, where growing up, as I've shared, my little sister, who was 7 years old, and keeping with the number 7, she passed away from an asthma attack when I was 10. And there are 3 of us. We have an older brother as well. And all of us had a variation or both of asthma, eczema, allergies. So both my sister and I had both asthma and eczema, and my brother had eczema and allergies, and he suffered from ear infections. And this is not uncommon. A lot of families are working on childhood ailments, childhood conditions. And we were told that we would eventually grow out of it, but my parents really did their best to help us get better, help the skin to improve, and so on. And so one of the ways that they were helping us is that they would take us to acupuncture. And I can't say I loved acupuncture. I found it quite uncomfortable. However, what I did love was seeing the maps of the body, the charts of the body that showed the energy pathways and the different acupressure points. And it's interesting because that early experience has influenced what I'm doing now, because now my laying of hands work is non-invasive in preventative care, but still using that same wisdom of the energy pathways and those points. And so in addition to taking us to acupuncture, they also got us a goat, and her name was Fancy Nancy. And the idea behind that was that cow's milk was mucus producing and goat's milk apparently wasn't. And so instead of having goat's milk, beg your pardon, cow's milk in our cereal, which from my early childhood, we were still getting milk delivered in the glass bottles with the silver cap. But then, yes, we were drinking goat's milk straight from the goat. Good times. Yeah, so and I'm thinking what my parents went through, because we were in and out of hospital. We had skin infections. Clearly, the asthma was bad, especially for my little sister. I had a few bad attacks. After my sister passed away when I was 13, I had another bad attack at school. And I remember thinking, I can't go. I can't leave my parents. They can't have two children go in this way. So it was, it was a thing. It was a thing that our family was working on. And but I don't ever remember my parents asking God or praying to God for, maybe they did privately. I just don't remember doing that as a family. Or even asking, what was this for? And what is this for is a really important question. And it should be one of the main spiritual questions that we're asking. Anything that comes along, anything that's unexpected or unwanted or unpleasant, in our bodies or just, circumstantial, we should be asking quickly, what is this for? And being still and listening for the answer. And for my part, I didn't really know how to ask that question. I wasn't taught to ask that question, but you're being taught now, so you can run with it. But I did pray. I did pray for the eczema to not touch my face, because I noticed that other little children cared about it and were afraid. And so I could cover up my arms to a certain extent. But I really didn't want it at my face. And that prayer was heard. It worked, actually. And even to the point when I was in my 20s, I had full body eczema. And it was on my back, it was on my belly, it was everywhere where it didn't used to be. The eczema used to, as a child, mostly appear at the joints. It was on my hands, it was on my wrists, ankles, the crook of my arm, the backs of the knees, sometimes the backs of my calves, sometimes my legs. But when I was in my late teens, early 20s, it was just my whole body from neck to toe was covered. And I somehow I did know, I did have the wisdom on what this was for. And what it was for was that it was a reflection of my inner conflict. And the inner conflict that I was having at the time was that I was in a relationship that I knew had gone past its expiration date. I knew that for me, it wasn't good for me to be in this relationship, and that I knew that I needed to make the decision to get out of it. I just didn't know how. And so my body, so then that part of my psychology, I guess, was using my body as a way to create separation and to also reflect back at me that conflict and that antagonism, because it was so bad that I didn't want him anywhere near me. And I would sleep in one of those sleeping bag inserts so that I could shake it out or wash it every day. But it also kept us a distance from each other. So that was an early learning for me. I somehow did have the gift of being able to kind of see things symbolically fairly early on in my life. And I did see what I did know why this was happening. And now it's become clear that the body is the first point, the first effect, the first convincing effect of the belief of separation, that we're separated from God. We are not our bodies, as we explored in the last service. We're not our bodies. We simply inhabit this body, and that the body is ever changing. And in fact, it turns out that research by the Institute of Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine at Stanford School of Medicine says that every cell in our body is replaced every 7 years, and that our skin is regenerated in 7 days. And when I went to see my hairdresser, also she was taught that the hair goes through 7-year cycles. So it seems that the number 7 is tied inherently into our biology, and as we continue exploring, we'll see that it also is tied into our natural evolutionary process as a mortal creative being. So it's interesting, isn't it? And so yeah, so the body is basically symbolic for the separation of God. And like we talked about in our last service, it's also a messenger. So it was teaching me how I was doing inside. It's a reflector, it's a mirror, it's a broadcaster, it's an amplifier, it's a transmitter and a transmuter. The body is an incredible thing. I was going to say device, I guess so. It's an incredible device. And then the function of the dis-ease, the conditions, the illness, is to remind us that we are not our bodies, because what we are cannot be sick, it can't be broken, it can't be pulled apart. What we are is always intact, and the indwelling God spirit within us is truly wholly intact and eternal. It's just simply, that ember that connects us to God and will remain with God, return to God when this life story is over. We find the body referenced in the Bible quite a bit, and it also is symbolic. And so as we talked about, the body is symbolic for the belief in the separation, that we are separate from God. The skin acts as that border, that boundary. And it's through the body that we act out our personal will, which can oftentimes result in sin. But at the same time, the body can be used of service to act out God's will. The affliction of the skin in the Bible is leprosy. It could also be unclean, but predominantly the skin affliction is leprosy. Then we have the ears, and the ears are symbolic for hearing God's voice, or that small, still voice within. And so the affliction is being deaf. And so when we're deaf, we have the inability to hear God's voice, to hear that small, still voice within. We have eyes. The eyes are symbolic with seeing God's vision and having spiritual sight or insight. And so the affliction is being blind. And in the Bible, there's also mention of the arms, which are the physical extension of doing God's duty, of showing up and doing God's work. And the affliction is that the arms become withered or limp or lifeless, symbolic of being without God. And then we have the legs. And so the legs are walking the path, walking God's path, walking our path, the path of our divine purpose, of our divine mission, in alignment with God's will. And so when we're lame, that's symbolic for not walking the path. And then also in the Bible, it reveals, talks about the mind or the brain. And so the brain is also that instrument of God's wisdom and God's intelligence, and being connected to that in this realm. So when we are not using our minds as a holy space, then the affliction is madness, insanity, lunacy, or the language of losing his senses. And you'll find this interesting. So a few weeks ago, I was invited to my friend's daughter's bat mitzvah, and the topic was on the skin, and was to do with leprosy. And so the rabbi was saying that the cause of the leprosy was speaking ill of others and basically gossip. So in this story, leprosy was the effect of using the tongue, using the voice, using words, using story against another. And the unhappy side effect was leprosy. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, this is actually an attempt at early censorship, because, don't talk about us, because if you talk about us, bad things will happen to you. But the way to heal, other than, through God's will, through Christ's grace, the way to heal is by shaving your head, shaving your beard, cleansing, and then sacrificing your best, most clean cow. And our good friend Jesus spent his life teaching against those primitive rituals. But there you have it. But the rabbi was onto something, because the body is that reflector and is that mirror. And so now we have the great works, for example, of Louise Hay. I mean, even Dolores Cannon, in our teachings, she had a couple of pages in her teacher manual, listing out the conditions, the physical conditions, and what they were pointing to psycho-emotionally. But so I have got with me, this is a great resource for looking into it's basically a directory of body parts and also conditions. And she provides, let me see. So let's look at skin. Oh, let's look at eczema. Okay, so I'll just show you. So we have the condition, and then we have the subconscious belief, the false belief, and then she provides a replacement thought system, a thought pattern, or a replacement belief. All right, so eczema says it's breathtaking antagonism, mental eruptions. And so the healing statement is: harmony and peace, love and joy surround me and indwell me. I am safe and secure. Let's look at skin from this point of view. Skin protects our individuality. And the affirming statement, the healing statement is: I feel safe to be me. Then we have skin problems. She lists psoriasis, hives, rash. The psycho-emotional cause is anxiety, fear, old buried guk. I'm being threatened. And so the healing statement is: I lovingly protect myself with thoughts of joy and peace. The past is forgiven and forgotten. I am free in this moment. Let's look at legs. So legs, we have carry us forward in life. All right, that's pointing to our life path, our life journey. The affirming thought, the healing statement is: life is for me. Wow, that's a good one. She's also saying lower legs, fear of the future, not wanting to move. And the affirming statement is: I move forward with confidence and joy. knowing that all is well in my future. Oh, funny. And we have leprosy. All right. And so leprosy, let's look just for fun. Inability to handle life at all. Okay, apparently it's not to do with gossip. A long-held belief in not being good enough or clean enough. And the healing statement is, I rise above all limitations. I am divinely guided and inspired. Love heals all life. So yeah, good stuff there. All right. And so 7, and so again, just to remind us that according to the research by the Institute of Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine at Stanford School of Medicine, that every cell in our body is replaced every 7 years. So this 7 is inherently part of our biology. And then the Eastern traditions, the traditions that come out of Tibet, Asia, out of India, their ancient writings and their ancient illustrations depict these energy centers. Now, in Tibet and in China, they point to 5 main energy centers. However, there is also a school of thought that came out of India that point to the 7 energy centers. And I've speculated on this, and I've wondered whether those energy centers, you know, that maybe some folks, the ancients had 5, and now there are 7. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the 7 energy centers, which we'll talk about a little bit more after the break, but the 7 energy centers are reflective or part of our conscious evolution through this lifetime, and so fits into the fact that the number 7 is pointing to this process, this journey to completion, to perfection, which we know because according to Genesis, the universe was created, God created everything by the 7th day, so that could be the day of rest. So the 7th day became the Sabbath day. All right, so from here, I think it's time now to take a break, to pass the basket. It's that time. So I just want to say thank you for supporting the good work that we do here at the Alila Ministry. That, you know, our purpose is to help remember and know our divine nature, to deepen our relationship with God, and to heal through it. And so, yeah, so thank you everybody who contributed last service. I appreciate that. And so contributions can be made by check to Alila Ministry and sent to 430 Springfield Avenue, Suite 209 in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. The zip is 07922, or you can use Zelle or PayPal. If you opt for Zelle, just use that number. And the account name is Alila Ministry, or use the PayPal URL or the QR code. So I'll be back after a short music break. Just enjoy the tunes.
We'll hide out here for as long as you want. You want. Brick by brick, we lay the bones to this old place. Memories I won't let ever fade. Come back home to me.
All right, welcome back. How are you all doing? I hope you're well. All right. So why is 10 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. Okay. So as we know, numbers are not really things. They're pointers to something. Just in the same way that the word water can't quench our thirst. 7 is not something that we can weigh or dissect or have direct experience through our senses. But what's interesting is that the number 7 points to something important. It points to something symbolic. And what's interesting is that when we look up how numbers are used in the Bible, there does seem to be an intentional pattern. And I'm not saying I know what that is. I don't. But what's interesting is that the numbers 1 to 7, when you do a search, the numbers 1 to 7 are used clearly as counters and to point to something. And they appear repetitively throughout the Bible, 1 to 7. And then if you look up the numbers 8 and 9, it's not the same. There's much fewer references to those numbers. And if you do find references to the numbers, it's because they're within a greater number. So she lived to 189 or something like that. And so it's different. And so in the Bible, the number 7 actually appears including 7 and its variations, such as seventh, sevenfold, or sevens. It appears in the Bible 591 times. And so the number 7 is the foundation of God's word and God's work. And again, it symbolizes this journey, this process towards completeness and towards perfection, both physical and spiritual. And we find that the letter G is the 7th letter of the alphabet. Throughout the Bible, there's so many references. So I'll just go quickly over a few of them. We won't really do a deep dive, but it's just enough. It's just interesting to see this repetition of the number 7. So in addition to Genesis, where the universe was created within 7 days, and in the book of Revelation, there are 7 trumpets, 7 seals, 7 churches, 7 angels, 7 letters to the 7 churches, 7 bowls, 7 stars, 7 priests, 7 thunders, 7 golden candlesticks, and 7 last plagues. And we could say that the 7 candlesticks or the lampstands are symbolic of the spiritual light shining out to a spiritually dark world, and that the churches then are supposed to be the examples of that light and of that holiness. And as with the priests are to be an instrument of emanating that spiritual light. And it's interesting too that the candlesticks or the lampstands are not the light themselves, but rather the holders of that light, the container or the apparatus upon which that light can shine. And so we learn that Jesus performed 7 miracles on God's holy Sabbath day, on the 7th day, 7 miracles on the 7th day. Part of those miracles was healing a man born blind, a man without spiritual sight. And so he heals him of that. There is a man who's disabled as well. And so not walking the path, not walking the spiritual path. And so he's healed of that to put on the right path, the right way. He also healed a woman who had been made sick by a demon. So the whole body is cleansed now. He healed the withered hand of a man attending a synagogue service. And so that man's arm was now, he's unable, he's not fulfilling God's duty. And so now with the healing, he's able to now fulfill his divine mission here. We also have the 7 deadly sins. And while they're not in one place in the Bible, there's not one collection of the 7 deadly sins referenced in the Bible. That came later, probably compiled through the Catholic Church, but they are there. And the reason why they're referred to as deadly is because the result of living them is spiritual death, that your life is not being wholly, your life force is not being used for a holy life. So we have, let's look at them. So we have lust, which is the excessive desire for sexual gratification. We find in Matthew, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Number 2, gluttony, which is the overindulgence or the overconsumption of food or drink. And from Proverbs 23, be not among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. Number 3, we have greed, excessive desire for material wealth or possessions. And we find that in 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It's through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Number 4 is sloth, and that is laziness, avoidance of work or duty. We find that in Proverbs as well. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. There are many examples. I just picked one example for each one. Number 5, we have wrath, which is the intense and uncontrolled anger or hatred. We find an example in Psalm 37. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. And we've talked about it before, last service, when we were talking about the temple as the body, that those stressful emotions, the anger, the grievance, the unforgiven, the fear, the guilt is the poison that we drink and harms our own innocent bodies. Number 6 is envy, which is jealousy or resentment towards others, success or possessions. We find this in Proverbs 14. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. And then number 7 is pride, which is the excessive belief in one's abilities or qualities. It's often considered the root of all the other sins. And the example is also from Proverbs 11. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. So it's teaching us about humility. And so remember what we talked about in our previous service is that sin, just as a reminder, is just simply living out of alignment with God's will. is that you're using your personal will to make choices that are outside of God's will. And usually those choices are to do with fulfilling sensual or selfish, distracting kind of needs. And so I also came upon the seven meanings for the word God, and I thought we would just explore these, take it or leave it, but I thought it was worth taking a look at. So God the Absolute, which is unimaginable to us, is the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, and that is all, and all of this is contained within it. The second God, the second, is God the ultimate, who which is transcendent of time and space. And it's almost as though if we were to look at the yin yang symbol, it's as if God the Absolute is the space outside, and then the circle and everything inside, it's the absolute. And then God the ultimate becomes the circle. It's that first point where out of nothing there is something, God the ultimate. And still yet there is no time and there is no space. And then out of that we have God the universal Father, God of all creation. And we can meet him here. The God that we met in Genesis, and we meet him here again in Nehemiah 9. Thou, even thou art Lord, alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worship thee. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because he is the creator. This is the creator spirit, the creator energy, the universal Father of all creation. And then out of that, we have the seven angels that's referenced. And in the book of Enoch, they're named. Let me see if I can list those off for you. So the named archangels are Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Saracuel, Gabriel, and Ramiel. And maybe on another service, we'll explore those. But the seven angels are an active force assisting in the creation. That includes us. Then we have God, the supreme of time and space, God, the Holy Spirit, and God, the Son. So just feel that out, see how that feels for you. But what's interesting about that just kind of thinking about these seven meanings for the word God, what can be encapsulated in that, is that sometimes when we're doing, for example, quantum healing hypnosis work, the infinite wisdom, and we are setting our intention to have a direct connection to the highest, wisest, most loving level of consciousness, level of wisdom, level of love. And so our intention is to reach and connect with God consciousness. And sometimes the reference, the pronoun that's used is we. And so therefore we end up saying they when we're telling a story about it. You know, as I've contemplated that, I've come to think that it actually fits, because our language is limited. When we use language, it can never actually be adequate, ever. It can never be adequate to describe all that is. And so because it contains all, it is a they and it is a we, because it includes God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, God the infinite creator, and then all the way to the Alpha and the Omega, which is totally unknowable to us. So now coming back to the yin and the yang symbol then, so we have all that is, we have the creator, and then we have that line that runs right through the middle, which is showing us now the light and the dark, time and space. And so actually, even within the yin yang symbol, we can find 7, because we can find 7 in the space that's all around. So that's, sorry, we can find number 1, if you like, in the space that's all around, 2 in the circle, 3 in that center separating line, 4 in the light, 5 in the dark, 6 in the light in the dark, and 7 the dark in the light. And it's all there. And so that line exists within us. So you can see here that there is this line that it runs along the spine. And so this line is this channel for the light and for the divinity and for the earthly part of our nature and the spiritual part of our nature as energy to be able to interact and to be that channel through which our evolutionary cycles get lived. Because out of that energy line is born these energy centers. And so in Taoism and in Tibetan tankas, you can see that the energy centers predominantly are 5. But in the traditions that are coming from India, there is a system of 7. And actually you can see the graphic. This is just an abstract graphic, and so the energy centers are depicted as lotuses, but essentially they're light. And the word, which many of you would know, is chakra, and chakra just simply means wheel or circle, because it's used, for example, in the Wheel of Time, the Kala chakra. And it's also in the Jivana chakra, which is the wheel of life. And so the word chakra is just simply a word for wheel. And in this case, it's a wheel or circle of light, but it also suggests movement. And if we look here at this pictograph right here, I was using my cursor, but I realized you can't see my cursor. So this is just an abstract iconograph of these energy centers. And right through the middle there is that same pole. It's reflected there. And this is the journey. This is the journey of our evolutionary cycle. We're moving through the lowest expression to the highest expression, low to high, until we attain perfection. But we start with the flight fight level of consciousness. It's all to do with our relationship with ourself, our world, to our creator. And so finally, as we move through these stages, we're ascending until we reach our spiritual sight and that pure connection with our mind melding with God's mind through the human soul. Here we go. We have the 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so each of those stages contains experiences and lessons and its aspects. It's stages of our consciousness and conscious evolution. Again, from fight, flight, kill or be killed type level of consciousness, creative level of consciousness, service and duty level of consciousness, heart-centered, humanity level of consciousness. Now we're connecting our will to God's will. Now we're sharing in divine sight. And now this is our spiritual path, and our spiritual direct connection with God. All righty. Okay, so I think that I think that might conclude our service for today. So it's been a bit of a journey, hasn't it? But you've learned a lot. And just to recap, so 7 is the symbol for spiritual illumination, the process to perfection, the process and the journey to perfection. And so as we journey through the 7 evolutionary light centers within us, we experience and we learn each of the necessary and required phases in our life to then become our highest, best expression, which then manifests in this world as a well-rounded human being, a well-rounded human, spiritually guided adult, which to me actually kind of looks like the letter G. So be your good God self. You are divine perfection. You're perfect just the way you are, because after all, God created you. All right, so thank you for joining me today on our exploration of the mysteries of the number 7. Remember too that you can join me for online classes. You can just jump onto our calendar, alilacenter.org. Just click on the calendar link and see what's coming up. In person, if you're local, or if you feel like you want to travel, June 2nd, I have a 1-day spiritual meditation retreat, mostly silent. And then I think I will bring I'll put the Journey Through the Chakras class on the calendar. I think that might be Friday afternoons. I'm thinking about that. And then on the typically, unless I'm traveling, mindfulness-based meditation class at 7 p.m. Eastern on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And then on the 4th Monday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern, I have the meditation and laying of hands class. Alrighty, so have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.